Hey, Lisa, I didn't know that.
Okay. I just wanted to
I
make
just,
sure.
yeah, no, I'm trying to get ahead on my driving, and
Oh,
I'll pull over when the meeting starts. So, but it was easier to log in before I started driving.
perfect. Yeah, I logged in just in case anyone um logs in, so they can see that somebody's here.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just hang out until they get here, and then I'll pull over someplace. But this at least gets me closer to home.
Yes, yes, it does. Drive
All right.
carefully.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hi, Alyssa, you there?
Yes, I am.
All right, good. We're gonna get started. Good evening, everyone. I am Michelle Hirsch, I'm filling in for Michelle Hirsch. This evening as Chair of Laws and Rules. We're calling this meeting to order here at 7:54. 6:54, sorry. See, daylight saving. Even though we're waiting for one member, we are going to go ahead and get started. So the first item of business is the Community Preservation Plan update. We have Julie Noble here to fill the promise of update.
All right, so thank you for having me. I am also joined tonight remotely by two members of the Kingston Land Trust, the board of the Kingston Land Trust president, Michael Drillinger, and another member, Kevin McAvoy. Do you have a role on the Land Trust? Are you secretary of the Land Trust, Kevin?
Yes, I'm the secretary.
Great. So I'm here to give an update on the community preservation plan in anticipation of soon in the future bringing forward draft legislation to the council. The purpose of me being here tonight is to take the temperature of the council on whether or not, this is the bottom line, and I'll walk through the process if you want me to. Take the temperature from the council on whether or not you would support a real estate transfer tax. That's the bottom line. So as a backup, just backing up, the community preservation plan was completed last year or 2 years ago at this point. So the plan is complete. There's no action that has to be done, but should the city want to move forward with creating a community preservation fund, which is permissible by law that is enacted here in the Hudson Valley by the state, the council, you all, would need to adopt 3 local laws, one of which would be establishing the real estate transfer tax, which would then go to referendum this year in November. The local laws would move forward with my stewardship and with the Corporation Council helping to develop those laws. But after the adoption, that work from the campaign would be handed off to the Kingston Land Trust, which is why Michael and Kevin are here representing the Land Trust. One of the steps that is being taken right now is doing, which we had said that we were going to do, is public polling to understand from the community, hey world, what do you think of a real estate transfer tax? And Terrell, I'm not sure, you've all been briefed on the community preservation plan before, right? The 3 of you have?
Yes,
Generally,
that's just when I came on board.
Okay, Terrell?
I have not.
Okay, so I don't know that you have a copy yet, then I will give it to you. The community preservation plan was the 3rd step of work that was done by the city, first being the natural resources inventory, the second being the open space plan, the third being this community preservation plan, starting with what natural resources do we have, what are our visions for conserving that open space, and this plan, the 3rd step, is identifying by the parcel level, meaning to each person's individual property, what the value of their property is to natural resource or cultural or historical preservation, giving each specific parcel a score of 1 or more based on criteria like, does it have historical value? Does it have agricultural value? Does it have natural resource value? Those sorts of things. The darker the color, the higher the score. If the parcel gets a score, they're automatically eligible to receive funding for preservation or conservation, but it is by choice of the landowner. So it's only with willing landowners that anything would happen on any of the parcels. Nothing has to happen, it just could happen. And should the community would like to move forward with it, the council would first have to adopt, and then the community would have to adopt via referendum at this year's election, this year's, general election in November, a real estate transfer tax, which would mean that, in this case, we are pulling the community, and I'll let Michael speak to that in a second, but our municipality, if we adopt the law, would establish what the real estate transfer tax would be. And it has varied in other communities in the region. Red Hook has adopted one for 2%. Warwick, 0.75%, New Paltz, 1.5%, Gardner, 1.25%, Marbletown, 1%, Chatham, 1.5%. So generally between 0.75 and 2% of a tax on real estate that is transferred. Only the tax would be applied to the sale above the residential median sales price. In Ulster County, in 2022, the residential median sales price in Ulster County was $350,000, which means if a home in the city of Kingston or a parcel of land sells for less than $350,000, there is no tax applied. If it is sold for more than $350,000, the difference of $350,000 and above, so if it's $351, there's that sales tax on the $1. If it's $450,000, it's sales tax, sales transfer tax on the $100,000. And so this would be a tax for people who are buying higher end homes in the community and taking that funding and putting it towards open space conservation in the city. A community preservation advisory group advisory board would also be established by local law that would be responsible for managing the funds, which can quickly add up to millions of dollars and has in other communities. Those funds, as are outlined in the plan, could be used for outright purchase, they could be used for land, conservation easements, they could be used for management of the land, lots of different things, and it's only with willing landowners. So in no time could the advisory board go and say, hey, 101 Wilson Avenue, you're a deep red color, we're buying your land, it's no longer buildable, whatever. None of that could happen, it's only with willing landowners, and there's many different tools that could be used that don't all just end up with just an outright purchase. So, that being said, the reason I'm here tonight is not to ask for any local law or resolution tonight. It is to keep you in the loop and get the temperature on this, because if the temperature of the council is that a real estate transfer tax is not going to happen in the city of Kingston, then the trajectory of what we and the Kingston Land Trust will do from here forward changes dramatically. And including the amount of money that is spent by the land trust on campaigning. So here's a few options. One, if the council has an appetite for moving this forward, the responsibilities of the council would be 3 local law adoption. And all of this, by the way, would need to happen and get to the Board of Elections by August 2nd. And obviously, local laws take 2.5 months through the council.
Right.
So we're backing up to like next month or so. The 3 local laws that would need to be adopted would be adopting the plan itself. So, and it doesn't have to be, I should mention, it does not have to be all or nothing. But here are the laws: adoption of the plan and seeker, so state environmental quality review of the plan. That's one. The second is establishment of the Community Preservation Fund and Advisory Board. The third, and separate, is establishment of the real estate transfer tax. For full disclosure, there are 3 communities that I'm aware of that have adopted 2 of those and not gone forward with the referendum. They've adopted the plan, they've established the fund, but they've said, great, you're gonna fill the fund with money in some other way. It's
Right.
not going to be via
I
real
see.
estate transfer tax,
Right. Could be private funding, grant funding, whatever.
whatever.
Right, okay.
So,
Very,
tooth fairy,
very.
exactly.
They don't have to get much money.
The only part of this that there is discretion on the level of community is not what the median sales price would be, that's always dictated by the sales, and that, by the way, in 2020, it was $280,000, last 2021, it was $320,000, 22, it was $350,000, keep going up. And that will continue to change as the years go on, so it doesn't stick at 350, it will be based on that year. What we would need to determine, and that's one of the reasons we're doing the polling, is what that percentage of the tax would be. And as I mentioned, those other communities, there's 6 communities just in our area, and they all have different
Right.
percentages, but there's generally the same range.
Mhm.
So, just before I keep going on, Michael or Kevin, did you want to add anything or speak to the polling?
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting us. Julie, I think you're doing a great job explaining everything. The polling, I have authorized the polling company to start the polling, but I haven't heard yet whether the polling is actually started. But among the questions that the polling is going to ask is a range on the a low number and a high number on the percentage of the transfer tax that will guide us. And if anybody has any other question about what the KLT's role in this is, or about the CPF that Julie hasn't addressed, I'm happy to field those questions.
Did you want that in a grid, is that what you're trying to do?
No, I was fixing
Okay.
the shot that they think of us.
Please don't like it.
Actually,
I've been told,
You have?
yes, today I was told. So just so it is underway.
and how did
Did
you
you do the whole thing?
your phone?
I did the whole thing because I answered the phone.
Well, that's cool. That's great. That's great.
So, I had a
Isn't
question.
that so?
Yeah, that's so appropriate.
That is so 20th century.
No, my question just related to what you were saying, sir, about what is the role of the Kingston Land Trust in this? Did you hear that?
Yes, I did. I muted myself and then I had to unmute myself. Yeah, so once there will be there's a point in this process where the city has to step back and be hands off, and that's the point at which the general public can be educated and hopefully influenced to support approval of the ballot measure once it's drafted. And the Kingston Land Trust has volunteered to step up and take on that role. So we're going to be doing advocacy work. Once the polling is done and we get a clearer idea of what the ballot measure might look like, I'm expecting that work probably will start in early May and go all the way up to the election. And the Kingston Land Trust really sees the CPF as a force multiplier for conserving open space and protecting the environment in Kingston. And that's why we think it's worth our while to invest our resources in supporting this.
So
Thank you.
who would pay it, the buyer or the seller, the transfer tax?
The buyer.
The buyer itself, okay. And this would not be attached to any land sales?
It would.
It would be, so it's not just the structure, it's based on.
Yeah.
How do you staff it?
How do you staff
You're gonna spot of money,
the board?
yeah, you're gonna spot of money and they're gonna want to spend it, do things with it. So who's the,
So ultimately, the board is managed by the city. So it would be, to build on what Michael was saying when he said that the city has to be hands-off at some point. Right now, I'm sitting at the table as a city employee, moving through the legislation. Once the legislation either gets passed or does not, I cannot advocate for something to be on the referendum. I can't participate in a campaign.
Right.
I can provide you facts and data, but I can't do what they would be doing. Should it move to referendum and get adopted, starting in whenever we could say this will go into effect whenever, January 1st. Chatham did it, so it went into effect February 1st. I don't know why of this year, but either way, at that point, the city would resume oversight of the board. And that would be managed, the fund would be managed through the city itself. So there would be non-municipal members of the advisory board, like the land trust and other interested stakeholders, and there would be municipal participants. And the transactions would still, my understanding is that the transactions would still need to be approved by the council, common council.
So there's a possibility that it would require the hiring of someone to do that work. By the city.
I am not aware in any of the other communities thus far, and Red Hook passed theirs in 2007, Warwick in 6, New Paltz in 20, Gardner 22, Marbletown in 22, Chatham in 23. I'm not personally aware of any other community hiring somebody,
So they just add it to somebody's load, which is fine.
like the comptroller.
Right.
like-
Right.
I don't know, you don't know of any other community hiring somebody, do you?
No, Kevin or I are not aware of any other community actually hiring someone.
So, I'm happy to answer any other questions if you want clarification on what the plan is and isn't. For edification purposes here, the plan isn't able to, this is prescribed by New York State legislation. It cannot be used for housing. It cannot be used for infrastructure, so it cannot be used for like filling potholes, paving roads, fixing sewers. It can't be used for roads or anything like that. It can be used for open space, historic and cultural preservation. So if someone's like, and I think one of the poll questions was, do you trust that the money that is collected is going to be used towards what it says it's for? It's prescribed by law. So this is not a Kingston thing, this is a New York State law that it's prescribing. So there can't, even though it is extremely important to the community that there is funding for housing and infrastructure and all these other things, this money cannot be swindled or misappropriated.
Right.
There you go.
Right, rated, right.
And what are some examples of things that communities have used their funds for?
So outright purchases of land, conservation easements on land properties. New Paltz, I know that they've, even in the short period of time that they've gotten theirs, they've raised multiple millions of dollars already. I don't know any kind of more specific examples. Do you guys know?
Yeah, they've acquired otherwise unused open space for parks in a consortium of 5 communities on Long Island.
So it could be used to set up farmland for a community garden space in the middle of the community. It could be to establish a park in a park desert in the middle of the city.
We can also use it for new or expanded non-motorized trails.
Right. I mean, there's wildlife corridors in the city that are extremely valuable ecologically. They could be conserved, particularly along some of our water bodies, so that people will never build here. Forest tracts of forest land, putting them in creating them as parks. So there's a number of different things that could be done. It is unique in the city compared to some of these other places that are much more rural.
Right,
It is unique. It's unique for us to have an open space plan. It's unique for us to have a natural resources inventory. It's unique for us to have a community preservation plan.
could funds be used to sort of improve or enhance our existing parks, or is it only for new space?
I believe it can, right, Michael?
Yeah, I believe it can be used for improving existing parks.
Same thing with historical properties. So this
Oh,
also applies to
okay.
historical properties. So historical properties can be preserved, enhanced. Properties adjacent to historical properties could have value and could be preserved and enhanced. Same thing with properties adjacent to parks or corridors or in historical districts that aren't already designated as historic.
Mhm.
Same with cultural.
So I'm surprised we've not accepted the plan yet.
Yeah, I've
Really?
tried a couple times, but we thought that it might be best to do it all at one time.
Okay.
You could also, yeah, I mean, absolutely, you could adopt the plan and do seeker and cross off the first local law and never do either of the other two. You could adopt the plan and go through seeker and you could say, well, let's put this on referendum next year. I won't make any comments about the referendum. It could be considered that if someone were to put anything on a referendum in a year where there was a presidential election, there may be a higher turnout than other years.
It's an interesting time to put a referendum.
Yes. And perhaps a good time, because that way you're getting,
Maybe
really
yes, maybe
sensing
not.
the will of people,
Maybe yes,
or
maybe
if
not.
it's, right.
Every election is the will of the people.
Well, of course it is, but there are more people who, let's say,
So
exert their
you're
will
saying
in
that
the
the
general.
funding could then be used in historic districts to preserve the character of the area? How would that work? So for instance, if I had a house that was 2 houses down from a historic property, let's say a state historic property, would it be state, would it be local historic, would it be national registered property?
These are good questions, and I'm going to see if it references historic and here specifically. Kevin, you couldn't answer that, could you? Oh, here we go.
So locally designated state or.
Historic preservation tools available are primarily reactive in that they are deployed as part of a review procedure for regulated actions where there is just jurisdiction. There is no mechanism or funding to secure a historic site from being damaged or destroyed for actions that are not subject to regulatory review. Despite regulatory structures as referenced above, many important historic resources have been lost to demolition or demolition by neglect due to lack of regulatory authority and or funding availability, especially in older historic cities like Kingston. None of that seems like the answer to what I'm asking.
So another element would be eligible for it. You know, the whole category of buildings eligible for inclusion in the National Register can be considered historic.
The eligibility.
Right. I don't know, I'm just saying, you know, that's, so I don't have, you know, I don't remember that from the plan, but I'm just saying that's in the register, in the National Register, eligible to be included in the register,
Right.
I don't know.
But this, I'm more talking about the local designation, because there are buildings that are locally designated as
Okay.
historic. And then there are other buildings that are New York State and National
Right,
Register.
right.
And
So
also it's
it's
National
clear.
Register and,
So it's clear that the National
That
Register,
should be
you know,
good.
that, yeah, and/or districts, but when it comes to a locally designated building that's owned by a person, how would, and the city decides that, you know, it's being neglected or whatever, could you then go in and distribute these funds? Would it be distributed as a loan? I'm just not sure of the mechanism.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. Kevin or Michael, do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't have the answer to it, but we can review this with the SHPO. Just as a full disclosure, I'm a landmarks commissioner. So,
Okay.
when you get into local landmarks, when they reference national, yeah, I mean, it's local and national are not the same, obviously, so. Right, so that's a good question, and I think it needs to be clarified with probably with SHPO.
Mhm.
And while I have
the-
your attention, look, there was one other thing that nobody's asked this question yet, and it has to do with what happens if somebody asks, why can't we use it for housing? It's because it's precluded in the code, but there's a separate initiative that Dee Barrett in the State Assembly is sponsoring presently that would have a similar fund to this fund. It would cover housing. So just keep that in mind as tax rates are being discussed or kicked around, if it gets to that. I'm working with Steve Rosenberg, formerly of Scenic Hudson, and a consortium of 14 nonprofits, so 7 of which are land groups and 7 of which are housing groups, to review and sponsor policy initiatives in Albany with respect to affordable housing. And this fund is one of the policies. So we'll leave it at that for the moment, unless people have questions on that.
So the fund you're talking about is separate from this fund. This would be entirely new, but
Separate. Yeah,
Okay.
separate. Yes. And both of these originated in the East End of Long Island.
Huh.
Yeah, I think Fred Thiel in the Assembly was the sponsor for the recent one for the housing. I don't recall if he sponsored the Community Preservation Fund. Well, gotta check the state website to check that out. But they did do that initially, and then it was expanded to the Hudson Valley.
Okay.
So do we know of other municipalities that have adopted that third component, the real estate tax?
Yes, Red Hook, Warwick, New Paltz, Gardner, Marbletown, and Chatham.
Oh, those are the 6 you mentioned. Okay, those are in the area. And do we have any idea of like what kind of revenue that's generated for the funds?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. It's certainly public. We haven't pulled those numbers together yet, right, Michael or Kevin?
Right, we don't have those numbers. I'm actually waiting on the county records or statistics reporting office to get back to me with some raw data so that we could at least project what Kingston might raise given past history.
And then do we have, I guess maybe from that raw data, you might be able to pull what percentage of property sales would end up paying the tax?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
This is all data you're still trying to.
I know, for example, the county reported last year 550 deeds registered. But of those 550, I don't know at the moment how many were above median and how many were below.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I'm predisposed toward that, that tax. But we would need to know, I think, that kind of information before we can make a final decision.
Yeah, so there's two, I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I was just gonna say that there's sort of 2 things that we would come back with while we were presenting the local laws. One of which is, this is the result of the polling, i.e. the world feels this. Now, the polling company we're working with obviously is not going to get 24,000 or 8,000 or 5,000 or even 1,000 responses. We got at least one, so that's good. But they're not going to stop until they get several hundred. So we'll have that, which will at least give us the temperature of some of the community. And the other thing is this data, which is what have our sales looked like in the last couple of years? What would we have raised if we did this? What percentage does this really apply to in our community? And we can certainly get the information about what other communities have raised so far. I know that for those that have had it for more than a year, it's over 1 million.
Okay.
Is it only by phone or is it online poll?
Michael, the poll?
It's primarily by phone using phone a phone database that is proprietary. I don't know where they get the phone database from, but secondarily, it's they call it text to web, so they'll send you a text with a link to click on.
That generates lots of
Send you the
return.
text. A text referencing the poll that they will send you.
The text is referencing a link to bring people to what?
To the poll itself?
Yeah, yes, to the poll.
Okay,
So there is an online poll somewhere?
It sounds that way to me, but it wasn't made that crystal clear. Either that or it sends you somewhere that will notify someone to call you back.
Can you find out from the polling company if there's access to us putting a web link to the poll on our website?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that now.
Yeah, but the polling company, did they say, they didn't say who they're calling on behalf of?
And in fact, in a moment of weakness, I answered the phone.
Right.
It was not somebody that I knew, and it was a location, and most of the time,
Right.
I don't bother, but I was feeling.
Curious.
Or they have a telepathic element.
It caused me to pick it up. So, you know, if it had been another day, would I have picked it up?
Right.
Don't know.
yeah, I don't generally pick up the phone unless it's a phone number that I recognize.
Yeah.
And-
And we're taught not to click on things that we don't know.
That's-
They're calling house phones and cell phones?
Well, they have to be cell phones.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it'd be great if there was email access.
Okay, we will look into that.
At least the one.
We're on the city website.
Yeah.
So we could adopt the plan and do the secret stuff. On its own, so as a standalone.
Correct.
Is there any reason we shouldn't do that?
Are you asking me?
Well, I don't know, just in general. Is there any?
In my opinion, no, and frankly, if we did decide to group them all together, we should have adopted the plan right when I finished it,
Mhm.
February, whenever we finished it. Whatever the date says on the front, but we didn't.
2023.
Oh, we could.
We could. And I would absolutely be predisposed to approve the plan. And even to do the other two,
Yeah, we could.
pending information, pending information.
Adopt the plan,
I mean, but the
approve the
fact,
secret, and then,
yeah,
okay, let's see what that next step,
Okay.
just the steps.
and I think the fact that it's only for willing homeowners, I think is something that makes me, more inclined to do it, because you're not forcing anybody to
Yeah.
set up this fund. It's really just for homeowners who really want to make that gesture towards their city.
I don't get that part.
So, yeah, adopting the plan doesn't tie us to the fund, right?
No,
No.
That's the second thing.
that's two different things.
Yeah, that's just that, so the adopting the plan is just saying,
Right. No, that's
here's the
right.
plan, this is a great idea, here's the map,
Right.
we love this, okay.
Yeah. No,
The next
I'm in
step
favor of
would
that.
be, okay,
Right,
we set up a board and generate some, talk about money.
right,
And then the third step is the referendum.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first.
Are you saying you
two-
have a question about the willing landowner part?
Yes.
Yes, I'm not understanding.
So this plan, and I think it's printed in the back, if not, there's a link. We have ranked every single parcel in the city. So you can find your address and say, okay, I got 3 points because it has agricultural soils, 0 points because it has no water on it, 4 points because it got forests, whatever. 3 points because it's close to a park. My parcel has 17 points. If you have 1 point or 30 points, it doesn't matter. If you have even a point, you're eligible for the funding if you set up a fund.
You're eligible for the funding.
Meaning, if you sell your parcel and a transfer tax was established.
Yes.
That transfer tax will be applied to your property, will be applied to your property
At sale.
at sale. Well, I'm sorry, I stated that incorrectly. Regardless, it's irrelevant if you sell your property. If you have even 1 point, you could be eligible to be the beneficiary of the funding.
Okay.
Meaning,
Right.
you could use that funding to preserve your land, you could get a tax incentive with it, you could use a conservation easement on your property. But since it's at the parcel level, and it's all full and disclosed, we're not hiding anything, you can look up your parcel. We're not going to say, hey, dude that lives at 101 Wilson Avenue, you're 30 points out of 30. Which means yours is the most valuable and you have to do this.
Right.
And I can say, no, I do not.
Right.
But that's all, we're all talking step 2, right?
Step 2, which would be, right, so even if we don't do the real estate transfer tax, if we establish the fund and get money from the tooth fairy, then all of this still applies.
Right.
Well, the tooth fairy's
Don't put
gonna
that in
like
the
$10.
That's
Now,
$10
as-
that's from someone's
Quarter
property.
when I was a kid, it's up to like $10 I heard.
As an aside, the real estate, the broker's tax, did that decline? Okay, you know the tax, the 6% that real estate brokers are allowed to charge on
World.
each transaction. Okay.
Yeah, their commission.
Okay, but that commission, did that just go down? I think by like.
Yeah, there was a
2%?
court
So-
case that
I
was
heard
causing
that.
it.
So,
the radio.
so it might be, in other words, if I'm selling.
Right.
And my real estate sales cost via the real estate agent went down, this wouldn't be so hard.
But you
Well,
were just
for
saying
selling,
that
that's not hard to
that
do.
the person buying, that the buyer pays the tax, not the seller.
Seller's out of the deal, buyer pays.
The buyer pays it.
The buyer.
I'm sorry, I'm-
It's like a mortgage
So if
transfer.
someone
Yes,
is
that's
coming
like-
here
right,
from
right.
some other place,
Yeah, but-
or if they're moving across town.
Right, but in either case, it's being absorbed by somebody.
Yes.
If the seller sells it, he's gonna raise his price by that much or to absorb it, or the buyer.
No, but it's on top of the sales price though. I mean, does it change what the homeowner can sell his or her property for?
No.
So you could sell
They
it
could
for
sell it
whatever
for
you could get.
they could sell it for $349,000
and not be subject.
and not be subject.
Right. So it's really, the burden goes to the buyer, who's buying the property, who then would pay that if the home were worth over a certain amount.
Yes.
Okay,
I think that answers your question.
Okay, so,
we got it.
oh,
I think we got it.
I,
We see your hand.
Yeah,
Kevin?
okay. I found the answer. I have the answer to the historic preservation question. Okay, it's in the code. General Municipal Law, Section 6S.4L. Preservation of historic properties listed on the New York State Register of Historic Places and or protected under a municipal historic preservation ordinance or law. So it would be the local landmark. The state and the national tend to be consistent. There are a few cases where they weren't. I can think of one in Kingston was the Solomon Burger House, Transart. That may be on the NHR now, but it wasn't for a while. It was only on the state. So, but that would be okay, right? Transart would have been okay because they were on the state. So there we go.
So within a district as well?
Well, it could be a local district or the state district, which would, I think in most of our cases, the state district and the national districts are consistent. When we put something when we nominate it, it goes to the SHPO who puts it on the state and then they go to the National Park Service. What's the National Park Service though isn't involved in this. This is strictly a New York thing.
This was the this is different than what you're looking at. This is just the historical and cultural that's pulled out.
Right, that's all I'm talking about. There was a question on historic
Yes.
preservation. That's the answer.
But you have it.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, in terms of timing, in order, if the strategy were that the temperature of the council to move forward with all three, my timeline, the latest, without any special called special meetings, which of course you have the ability to do that, but using pre-existing meeting dates, I would either need to submit a communication to you by the 28th, which is not going to happen, for sure, because we won't have the polling done by then, and it's like 4 days away.
Right,
So what would happen is I would submit a communication by May 3rd. And in that communication, it would include the draft local laws and seeker language. And this supporting data that we just mentioned. It would then go to laws and rules on May 15th. It would then go to the Common Council on June 4th, second reading on July 2nd. To get to Board of Election by August 2nd.
So tell me why it would be a bad idea to communicate with us about the plan adoption by the 28th. And the secret.
Because I would need to submit it by this Friday, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to work with Corp Council to get the secret done in that amount of time.
and then there's the polling.
Well,
Which is separate, but I
just wanted to,
understand
if we want to adopt the plan,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
which it
absolutely.
appears everybody wants to do, you know, doing it sooner, in my opinion,
It's
would be
better.
better than lumping them all together and rushing around.
Would it be at all helpful to you to do the plan first
And then the secret?
to get that
We
done?
can't do
and
this,
put it
no,
on
we
the
can't
secret
adopt it without the
separate?
secret.
They come together, right?
We can,
It would have to be passed together, right?
well, isn't adopting it an action? I think we need a secret determination to adopt.
Before you can adopt the plan.
I mean, that's what secret, you know, secret,
Right.
you got it.
We never do that in my opinion.
I think, I assisted with preparing the, secra filing for the, open space plan. The environmental assessment form. Because it's a plan, it doesn't, it's not as big of a deal as you think.
No, it should just be a short.
Not an action, you don't have, shovels in the ground, that kind of thing, right?
I mean, I don't know.
What's the specific question where in here
Just the first part,
the part one?
the plan and the secret, sure. Because Barbara needs more to do.
I'm not trying to play Margaret, I'm just trying to figure out realistically, I mean.
Right,
Well, you laid out a schedule that we can do.
I laid out a schedule that you can do if it goes through laws and rules without any question, and if it goes to the 2 readings and then is adopted without any question.
Yeah.
As I said, you will all have the authority to call a special meeting also. Go ahead.
We're just talking about putting in a communication before Good Friday, right? The meeting itself would happen on the 17th of April, right?
that's correct.
And so it's possible to put in a communication and send in the additional material, say, a week in advance, or, to give more time.
I love that idea.
And if you don't make it, but at least it keeps the door open for
Absolutely do that.
relieving some of the pressure of everything else.
That would be
Are you
great.
suggesting doing just the first local law as a communication or both the first 2?
My suggestion would be the plan.
Plan only, with the
But he's saying that the secret review wouldn't take that long.
The secret,
no, plan is
the
secret, yeah.
the action on the plan requires a secret review. We have to make a secret determination when we adopt the plan.
Right,
So
so
it
when
should
I,
be short form, secret,
Right.
which is like this one back.
Barbara's point is when I'm submitting the communication, which I will do by Friday, because I'm not in
Right.
next week. I don't need to be submitting this completed seeker form with the communication. I would
Right.
say,
Right.
reference seeker form will be submitted in well
Exactly.
in advance of the April 17th meeting.
And then we could still work on the other 2, if we wanted to, in the schedule that you're talking about, but at least it gets the plan passed, which is
Right.
the most critical thing.
And in the meantime, the adoption of the planning seeker wouldn't be impacted by the polling or any of the other data that we would be collecting. The
Right.
other 2 would. And so in the
Okay.
meantime, I mean, the polling will be done by April, mid-April, something, right, Michael? And they're only doing it for a couple
If,
weeks.
if the polling is actually underway right now, they told me that once it starts, it would take a week to 10 days for the poll to be complete and for us to get their full detailed report. So it may be ready, it may be done by next week.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Tell people to answer their phones.
Yeah, I think that's probably.
Yes, exactly.
I think that we at the very least need to do a little outreach and make sure that the poll is on the city's website. And people can be referred to that. I don't know how much how many folks are going to pick up their phones such that it would be representative number.
I'm gonna defer to Barbara on this one because the poll is referencing the referendum
And not the plan necessarily.
and not the
This-
plan.
right.
And so would that be considered as
Right,
advocacy?
right.
I mean, I don't want to answer that right now.
Okay.
I'd like to just think about it.
Okay. Okay. All right, so then I will plan on submitting communication before the 28th for the adoption of the plan with a reference to seeker to be provided.
Mhm.
And then we'll gather the polling data and we'll gather all the other background stats that we need. And should all that be promising, meaning if the poll doesn't come back, everyone saying no.
We don't, it's not even one respondent.
I remember what I said.
We only got one response, and the guy was really cranky.
It's about picking up the phone.
Then we will move forward with submission of communication by May.
Just going back to the website, could the Kingston Land Trust, since they're undertaking the poll, could they put it on their website since the city, no, but the city can't, but we have to be hands off at this point in time, right? That's what you were saying before.
I don't know.
I don't know, whatever, you'll look into it and let us know, okay?
Yeah, I'll probably, yeah, I'll have to talk to Barbara about
Well, there's no reason the land trust couldn't do it.
that. There's definitely no reason the land trust couldn't do it, the question about whether or not.
Right, whether we.
Right, but the land trust could do it if they're doing a poll,
They
we're
can-
polling the Kingston residents, et cetera, because they must have a mailing
But
list
how
as
do
well.
we tell people to refer to the Kingston Land Trust?
Don't.
People commonly will go to
Oh.
the city
Right.
website.
Of course, but we can't.
You're
They would
gonna-
have to put out the
Right.
PR.
Well, a link to it will be conflict,
Well,
a link to the
Maybe.
KLT.
maybe,
So we know.
we don't know,
Let them talk.
Yeah,
yeah,
we need to review the poll for the objectivity of it.
right.
There's no reason the land trust can't do it.
That's what I was thinking.
It's great work.
Yeah, I mean, the plan sounds great. There's no reason why we shouldn't
Right.
pass it.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
so, thank you for your presentation and for your work on this.
Thanks, Michael and Kevin.
Thank you too.
Kevin, go dry your feet.
Thank you all for your
Thank you.
positive reception.
Did you have?
Yes,
I
have a question for you.
Yeah, he's not leaving. He's coming back.
This is the bushwhacking.
We bring something about the food for you.
All right.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda. This is informational because there are options, and so we want to begin thinking about those options. This is relating to, they call it revising city charters in New York State, report on this. I would prefer to refer to it as reviewing our city charter because revising to me seems a little presumptuous. So I think that the idea is that we haven't had a review of our charter in at least 30 years. 30, yeah.
I thought it was 20 and that still seemed long.
Well, I was saying 20 because I didn't remember, but I looked it up and I'm pretty
Oh, my
sure the
goodness.
last time was when we were looking at when we changed. There was the attempt in the early 1990s to change to a city manager form of government, and that was altered. I'm going into it, but,
It's
so that
online.
was,
You can find.
that was the early 1990s, yes.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So I think it's time at least for a review. Now, so I just want to go briefly, I've sent everyone a copy of the report that was put out by the New York State Department of State. And so you can look at it in greater detail. What's important there for our purposes for thinking this through right now is first it gives historical background about how it is that home rule developed, what home rule is, what kind of powers cities of different sizes have in New York State, because there are actually different references depending on population. Also what's important is there are 3 different ways to establish a review commission. One is, so a local law has to be adopted if it's done through the Common Council. So the Common Council could have discussion about this, create a local law, and then adopt that law, which would set in process the development of a council. The third option is that a mayor can call for a charter review or revision commission. In that case, there's certain limitations on the size and membership. So the mayor of a city may create a charter commission by appointing no less than 9 nor more than 15 residents of the city to serve as members. The commission is established upon the filing of the city with the city clerk of the mayor's certificate of appointment, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Then the third process would be one in which a group of citizens do it by an initiative. And so you'd have to get a certain number of signatures, and
That's on a ballot, or would that just be?
no, again, that would be more open in terms of the kind of commission that you could create, as I understand it.
And how is that initiative? I'm not, I don't know what it means to, establish an initiative. Does it have to have a certain number of signatures on it, or?
Yes.
So the 3 ways are governed by sections 10, 36, and 37 of the municipal home rule law. And I think the one we're talking about is the kind of voter petition process, which is the 10% of the voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election. That's a number that would apply to us, or was it 30,000 for a population of the 10%.
Okay.
There's a process for challenging as well.
And so then there are also, the report also goes into the ways that if a commission calls for changes, how those can be instituted.
Okay.
So those are all important things for us to keep in mind. So some of the things to think about as we're looking at the possibility of creating a review commission is that if the council does it, it would be through the local law process, but we would have, in a sense, some more creativity in terms of size of the body. Right? I'm not sure
No,
that we want.
that's what I was going to ask. Is there a minimum number that needs to be established for a review commission?
From my reading, and again, I'm not an expert, but from my reading, we would have more creativity in how we organized it. Because, if we said we wanted, so just for example, if we said we wanted at least 2 members from each ward, the mayor couldn't do that because anyone established by the mayor is limited to 15 people. Okay. He could say 1 person per ward because it says at least 9.
Not at least 9, I see.
So those are some things for us to consider. What kind of size, what kind of representation would we like to see? I don't know, and this will be something for further discussion. I don't know what kind of other characteristics we could call for in the makeup. I don't know how specific we could be about this many people that race or this gender, or what have you. Right. So those are some things for us to consider. Just how much representationality and what sort do we want? Right.
Now, if the mayor calls for the commission, does that need to have council approval?
No.
He could just do it unilaterally.
You can review a lot of it.
Okay.
And from what I understand, if we call for it, the mayor doesn't have any say,
Can't veto.
can't veto, right?
Okay,
I mean, you would have
Yeah.
your formal say, now we want to work with him, that's, I'm not saying we would,
Oh,
we would
but-
do it shrouded in mystery.
but legally.
And he would be surprised one day, what? What's this charter revision? No, we would be
Right.
working with him, absolutely.
Of course.
You know, and so, I mean, that could also be part of a process, is to say the mayor can appoint X number of people, or whatever.
Right, whatever it's.
Right.
Okay.
So if a charter revision committee is formed, however method, and they come up with some recommendations,
Mhm.
do they have to go to a referendum?
My understanding is that they do.
I think they
think-
do.
Yeah, I think revision of the charter has to go to referendum, right?
Yes,
Yes.
asterisk for a couple of other points about that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To be discussed later.
So this is a next year at best.
This could be a 2 or 3 year process.
Oh, yeah, these things
Comprehensive
take
plan
time.
took 2.5.
Right, it's
Yeah.
not gonna happen fast.
The what
No.
took 2.5?
Comp-
Oh, right. And that was pretty fast, actually.
Our-
Can I jump in with a question? I wasn't sure if you saw my hands.
Oh my God, it was just a fire.
I'm in my car, but I'm not driving. I have pulled over. It's very cold. I just wanted to make this point early on. I think that the process that we went with the zoning, we should use that as a model in terms of good education and public outreach. So what I would like to see with the charter review or revision, whatever you want to call it, is some kind of outreach to the public early on versus later on, especially since I think it was Bob who just mentioned this does have to go out to them to make the final determination if the task force does come back with changes. So I think it behooves us to start thinking about how we want to educate the public on what charter reform is, what it would look like, what it would entail, and then, you know, the fact that we would be asking them to make the decisions.
Okay,
Yeah.
now if the mayor were to do it, presumably he wouldn't need to go through that same outreach.
Ultimately, you'd have to have a referendum.
So.
Yeah, you
however-
still, if no matter what, if the task force, whoever, if it's from the council, the public, or the mayor, they come back, not the task force, I'm calling, because that's what we do, but the group would come back and say, these are the changes that we recommend. Those changes definitely have to go to referendum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's not, it wouldn't just be the mayor saying, okay, thanks, let's go for it. So that
And-
process would still be the same. The process that Rennie just outlined, the 3 steps, are just how to trigger this.
Right, in other words, those 3 steps are to establish the task force, and the task force would they be charged then with engaging in community outreach or making at least recommendations for community outreach, or would the outreach precede the setting up of the task
Well,
force?
what I'm advocating for is it to start at least some beforehand, because if the task or the advice or the committee is going to be community members, then we want to make sure that there's outreach before we are appointing community members, because there's a lot of community members who really want this and who would be
Yes.
interested, but that doesn't mean that there aren't others who have no clue what a charter is, no clue what charter
Yes.
review would be, that would also want to be involved. And I feel like we're just living in this bubble and the people who have been talking about it for years are, you know, we should definitely discuss with, and hopefully they'll want to be on the committee. But I just want to, you know, make sure that all the voices are heard. And I think that has to be early education.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so we can call,
Mhm.
you know, before we even have a law to establish a commission, we can call for a number of public hearings or events, whatever, so that we,
Just outreach.
Charrettes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for the zoning, we did sorry to interrupt, the Strong Towns came and did that presentation. Remember, that was during COVID when we were all remote. So, you know, something like that, whether we want to have an expert come to talk, or, you know, I don't know if I necessarily like the idea of a public hearing. I don't feel like that's as educational, but I'm happy to brainstorm any ideas if anybody wants to to kind of partner with me on this, but it would definitely be up my alley if you're okay with me doing that.
Except I would like to point out, you are the only person who's literally in a bubble at the moment. In your car.
I kind of am.
Yeah. So,
I would be happy to partner with you.
yeah, me too. Barbara,
Okay. We got volunteers.
or were you volunteering?
I am absolutely not volunteering. But just wanted to note that if this advances, I did live through New York City's charter reform process and was very closely involved, actually, because it is this is our constitution, right?
Right.
It's a municipal constitution, and it requires more legal resources than I think anyone ever imagines at the outset. And in terms of, we are not New York City, I am well aware, but the budgeting for legal assistance for that was high.
Interesting. Yeah.
My colleagues in the appeals division basically were transferred over to the mayor's budget
Yeah.
for a certain number of months, because they weren't able to work on anything else during the time the commission was preparing its work. So that's, I'm happy to separately share some information about that, because I was part of that to some degree. Secondly, there has to be an effort to gather, we talked about this a little bit at the finance meeting, I think, all of the earlier charters, which are not currently available, to kind of track the evolution of charter reform. I have seen some of the 1992-93 changes, but the whole reason that issue came up for finance last time was because I was looking for charter information from the 80s and couldn't find it. And so there's kind of an information gathering, not just for the education, but for the process to gather those legislative materials. And I don't have them, we have to figure that out. And then third, one of the issues that's top of mind for me is always the Rochester example.
And what is the Rochester example?
The case, which we can again talk about separately, but the city was involved in, when we went to the Court of Appeals, it was decided in November. It had to do with a relatively minor seeming change to Rochester's charter that the implications of that change weren't clarified until the Court of Appeals made a decision 20 years later. And it turns out that through that charter change, which no one could have known about at the time, they relinquished their right to establish a civilian complaint review board. And so even though 70+% of the voters approved that, the Court of Appeals struck it because of a charter amendment that happened in 1985. So I just think there's a lot of info gathering that should go into the thinking about this.
And, you make a very good point about, we're gonna do this, we need a budget line for it.
We do.
We need money to do this, so that the
Yes.
question then becomes,
So,
how much?
yeah, so that was another thing that I was going to point out. So not only would there be legal representation that would be required, but there's also certain things like it might behoove us to hire one or more people who are expert in leading this kind of conversation, this kind of process. So you might want to hire consultants, who have experience, not necessarily specifically in city charter, but in helping develop, in essence, the mission statement in a way, right? So we might want to look into that. That would be a cost. And the other thing here is, and we don't need to be governed by this, but I just want to point out that our budget process starts in 2, 3, 4 months, right? So if we could get some of this going and potentially put in some money in the next budget, that would allow us to actually get going with it. Whereas if we don't put any money, we can always come up with some money later. We could take it out of contingency or something else, but I would prefer if we were doing it with a clear eye toward cost, toward process, and so on and so forth.
I would agree with that.
Okay, Andrea, anything else?
I know, I just thank you, Rennie, for bringing this back up. I'm super, super excited to have this conversation, and I will reach out to Rennie and Sarah, I think were the 2 people who volunteered.
Yeah.
Once I get back from my work trip.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm cold sitting in my car, so I'm gonna log off, and start driving back again. So I will talk to you all later. Good night.
Thanks for checking in.
Yeah, well,
Bye.
we'll thank you later, Andrea, because you've added a lot of drama to this just from the shot there.
Looks like a film noir.
Yeah, it's like.
Yeah, and I'm surrounded by 18-wheelers too, and yeah, I think I want to go home now.
Yeah,
Good plan.
take
All
care.
right, I'll see you guys. Bye.
All right. Okay, so, yeah, if everybody would just review the report that I shared.
We can.
If everybody would review the report that I shared, and then we'll make sure to that the other members.
And when did you share that report?
Just a few minutes ago.
Oh, that's why I haven't seen it before.
It's the magic of technology.
Yes, it is.
Through secret hand gestures, I sent it out.
Okay, so
Excellent. All right. So if there's no other business before us, then anybody make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second by Bob, all in favor? Say what?
Aye.
All right, we adjourn. Thank you, Alyssa. Oh, Alyssa, can you put this in old business again?
Forever.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thanks.